This video is brought to you by CuriosityStream. Get a full year of CuriosityStream as well as my streaming service Nebula by using the link in the description. Happy Pride Month, everyone. Today is also my birthday, and because it's my birthday, I get to introduce you to my girlfriends. Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn, two of DC's most notable villains. Beloved characters, sex symbols, fan favorites, but perhaps more unexpectedly, they are by far one of DC's most popular ships in recent years, and canonical bisexual lovers. I use unexpectedly there in a very wavy finger quote way, because if you've been paying attention for, 30 years or so, then it's not necessarily that unexpected. These two characters have been paired up often in various works and media, they have notable chemistry, and there's a plethora of fanwork online for the ship under the Harley Ivy tag. Some of those may have been me, by the way. Sorry, this is my favorite ship right next to Narumitsu. Regardless, it's not necessarily surprising that this ship would take off the way that it has. Except it kind of is, right? Because preferred comic ships are one thing, but canon is a whole other factor. And the fact that this is both a gay ship as well as a ship featuring two supervillain characters rather than a superhero and a love interest makes it stand out. We don't really get canonical villain ships often, and certainly not ones given as much prominence and positive presentation as Harley and Ivy. So, why? How did we get here? How did these two Batman characters become a canonical couple? Why did people, aka me, latch onto it so much? So for this Pride Month, and for my birthday, I'd like to just have a bit of fun and take you through the evolving relationship of Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy. Okay, so before we get too far into this, let's just give a basic rundown on who these two characters even are, starting with the one that came first. Poison Ivy is a Batman villain that originally debuted in the 1960s. Her real name is Dr. Pamela Isley, and at one point in time she was a shy, timid, sort of sad botanist, or as we liberal arts majors like to call them, a normal botanist. This all changed when she was poisoned/experimented on with various different poisons and toxins and other plant-related things, which basically killed her and gave her plant-like abilities, initially being simple things like immune to poisons and poisonous lips, and has now evolved into a connection with this force called the Green, which is basically like... Look, comics are weird. I don't know how to properly explain the Green, except that it's like a cosmic deification of Mother Earth, kinda. I don't know, it's fucking weird. She has plant powers, that's all you need to know. Poison Ivy's role has always been an interesting one in the comics, as she's usually framed as a femme fatale, the sort of seductress that poses a danger to our heroes and people around her. A lot of her stories, especially early on, rely on her using the powers of pheromones and being a hot redhead to seduce men to get what she wants and or kill them. That being said, her motivations have always been a bit flip-floppy. Sometimes she just wants to rob banks and tend to her plants. Sometimes she wants to kill all humans so that plants and nature can thrive. The duality of women, you know. What this means, though, is that she more often than not ends up being one of the more sympathetic Batman villains. If anything, on the basis that sometimes she just wants nothing but to be a plant mom, and can usually be reasoned with to do some good. And then we have Harley Quinn, a character who is interesting. Harley Quinn debuted not in the comics, but rather in Batman the Animated Series, a show that would be the best Western cartoon of all time if it wasn't for the fact that Batman Beyond exists. Originally a spur-of-the-moment decision to give Joker a female henchman for one episode, Harley quickly became the show's breakout star, being by far its most popular original character. A lot of this popularity comes from Harley's personality and overall vibes. Being the Joker's partner seems like too nice of a term, so being the Joker's henchwoman, she carries a lot of the same appeal he does, with an emphasis on clown aesthetics, a chip and cheery demented personality, and just being really fun to see on screen, especially helped by her wonderful and iconic voice acting by Arlene Sorkin. But the other thing that makes Harley so interesting to people was her backstory and her dynamic with the Joker, which would get fleshed out and expanded more as the series went on. Harley Quinn started her life as Dr. Harleen Quinzel, a rather stable and mature and intelligent psychiatrist assigned to work at Arkham Asylum, where she would meet her primary patient, the Joker. Like a lot of girls, she goes through an unfortunate I can fix him phase and gets obsessed with this man despite his clear and obvious flaws, like being a murderer. She ends up falling in love with him and breaking him out of Arkham, convinced that they're in a loving, mutual relationship and she's found her dream man. Of course, he's not, and he mistreats her often, preying upon her codependency and obsession. This is all detailed in the comic and TV episode Mad Love, which, look, if you watch any episode of Batman the Animated Series, make it Mad Love. It truly shows off everything that makes these characters in this show so compelling and daring and engaging. I mean, people always do that thing where they talk about, oh, I can't believe this children's show managed to get that past the radar, but like, I am still amazed that they were able to get away with a scene where Joker straight up realistically slaps Harley across the face. As you might expect, a lot of Harley Quinn's episodes and stories were based around the Joker. Either stories where she is a secondary player to his main schemes, or stories that focus on Harley, but have the Joker as a constant shadow looming overhead, never fully leaving Harley's mind. And much like Ivy, Harley's portrayals tend to lean on a more sympathetic side. The fact is that Harley is a victim of abuse whose worst actions seem to be balanced out just by how horrible she gets treated and her potential to be better. You can always separate a good Harley Quinn story from a bad one just by the factor that it's easy to see which works simply view Harley as Joker's girlfriend. It's very, 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 very easy to tell which works simply view Harley as Joker's girlfriend. The good Harley stories, by contrast, view her as what she is, a victim and flawed, fucked up person that needs help from outside sources and needs to find self-love. Which leads us into our first big instance of Harley and Ivy. The first notable occurrence of pairing Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy together came in the Batman the Animated Series episode called, well, Harley and Ivy. In it, the Joker gets frustrated with Harley ruining one of his plans and kicks her out and breaks up with her. Harley attempts to do her own thing and make a name for herself and by chance runs into Poison Ivy, and the two get along and start living together. Ivy injects Harley with a special formula that will make her immune to Ivy's toxins, as well as encouraging her to fix her self-esteem and realize how bad the Joker is for her. And also there's this too. Yeah, this isn't really subtle. This isn't like there's hints of something going on. Definite hints. Though I will say that for the most part, that's really all you get in the animated series, both the show itself and its original tie-in comics. Allusions and nods to the fact that these two may be engaged in a romantic or sexual relationship. But for the most part, they're written to be, you know, gal pals. If I had to describe the way the animated series continuity tends to portray the relationship, it's twee romp. And that probably sounds like an insult, but I swear it's not. It's just sort of how it is. The stories where these two are together in this timeline tend to mostly be lighthearted fluff focused on these girls getting into wacky hijinks and less on the deeper personal stuff between them. And that's totally fine. They're good times. Harley and Ivy is honestly not my favorite episode of Batman the Animated Series. I think it's kind of mid, but it's still worth watching. Girls' Night Out from Season 3 is a good time, and the Harley and Ivy comic collection is a cute read as well. It's just, well, not really much but cute with fun little nods and jokes here and there that it's something more. But still, it provided a damn good foundation for this to continue off of. The two characters, in their appearances here, have great chemistry. In the commentary for the Harley and Ivy episode, writer Paul Dini says that he's not quite sure why he decided to pair these two up, except that it seemed fun to pair the, quote, screwball girl and the sexy sultry femme fatale, and that it's, quote, two sexy girls in Halloween costumes running around on a crime spree, which, like, yeah, Paul Dini, I read those Fiction Mania stories too. But he has a point. It's a classic comedy duo matchup and leads to a lot of great stuff, with Harley's wild and spunky attitude contrasting well with Ivy's more subdued and collected nature. I do acknowledge that part of the reason why the show probably couldn't go deeper into actually playing with their relationship was that this was the 90s and standards and practices would have been all on their asses for it. Though I will say that in the technically canon and totally unremarkable 2017 film Batman and Harley Quinn, a film so unashamedly sexual that it has a scene where Harley Quinn ties up Nightwing and initiates sex with him under questionable consent. Seriously, we need to quarantine Bruce Timm and get him a magazine or something so we can figure out why he keeps putting his fetishes in these movies. It still doesn't really fully verbally canonize the Harley and Ivy relationship on screen, rather just emphasizing how close their bond is and how Harley is the only thing that can bring reason to her, which is going to be a consistent through line from this point forward. That being said, when it comes to the animated series, if I had to rank it on the totally objective and valid measure of quality, the Be Gay Do Crime scale, I'd have to give it little points for gay and lots of points for crime. comics are long and weird and complicated, and I cannot possibly touch upon every single aspect, portrayal, or appearance of these two characters. Sorry, I can't. I mean, Harley Quinn alone is basically DC's second main character these days. Do you know how many fucking books she has at any given time? There's a lot. I read a bunch of them for this video. I hope they're tax deductible. But anyway, while I can't talk about everything, I can talk about recent canon stuff because that's where most of the interesting things are anyway. So Harley amassed enough of a following from the animated series that she was eventually incorporated into mainline DC Comics continuity, and her bond with Poison Ivy was introduced essentially right away, though still with the overwhelming sense of, you know, gal pals. Harley and Ivy would be canon in a few alternate universe storylines, mainly Injustice and Bombshells, and there would definitely be ship teases in mainline continuity. But it was in the run by Amanda Conner and Jimmy Palmiotti that the ship would officially become canonized in main continuity, with their first on-page canon kiss as well as word from DC that the two were in an actual polygamous relationship. And things were going well, until they weren't. After this, things get a bit dicey. So Harley and Ivy got brought into this event called Heroes in Crisis, an event so infamous that simply alluding to the fact that I read it on Twitter made everyone lose their minds. To describe everything that happened in Heroes in Crisis is to stare at the eldritch corners of the universe, but all we really need to know is that Poison Ivy dies and then at the end gets reborn into a new body. And there's this one cute exchange between the two, the one good part of Heroes in Crisis. This would lead directly into the exciting news that Harley and Ivy would be getting their own solo miniseries together called Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, all about the two being in a relationship and going on a fun road trip together. And then the book came out, and it was not actually good. The plot revolves around Harley doing some self-examination, deciding that she wants to try being a hero and helping people rather than being a criminal and supervillain. Okay, sure. That tracks. It's the direction that Harley has been heading in for a while. Meanwhile, Poison Ivy is dealing with having a new body and the complications that come with it. The two of them have a simple domestic life together before they have to leave the house because they get attacked by Floronic Man, which then leads to the series becoming a road trip story as the two try to escape, help Ivy with her new body, and bond with their blooming relationship. Up to this point, the book is fine, if a bit subpar, but then you get to the final issue, which is just weird. Like, we find out that apparently Ivy has a clone of herself that contained her good half or something, and they got switched up in issue 2, and that's the Ivy that Harley has been with for most of the comic, and that the real Ivy has been the one sending plant monsters out to kill them, not Floronic Man. The real Ivy is furious at Harley for not noticing the difference, for trying to do good, for being selfish and putting her own want of a relationship first, mocking her for even thinking that it would be something Ivy would be interested in. It's an incredibly bizarre final turn. Part of what makes it so weird is that it's hard to see exactly how we're supposed to view these final moments. Like, clearly Ivy has gone a bit mad and isn't thinking clearly, and in the end she has to be fused with her good second Ivy in order to calm down and stop trying to kill them. But there's also just the way in which Ivy talks about Harley and complains about the relationship. Like, yes, there is tension between these two. It's sort of a through line. A lot of stories focus on Harley fucking up somehow and the two having to deal with it. But the problem is that Ivy's whole speech about how Harley was being selfish and reckless and never actually cared about the real her rings really fucking weirdly, when in actuality, Harley spends the entire series trying to help Ivy by any means necessary and doing what she can to support her. Additionally, there's this whole thing of, you should have noticed that it was the fake me because I was acting off, but that doesn't really land when the real Ivy is acting so out of character and the fake Ivy is acting, like, in character. Like, what? I'm all for calling out Harley Quinn's wrongdoings, but, like, this is a rare case where she did literally nothing wrong. I think what gets me is that even if this is supposed to be viewed solely through the lens of Ivy being totally off base and crazy and evil and not herself, DC still made a miniseries about one of their most prominent queer couples, marketed the series to fans of that queer couple, and then ended it with one of them giving a long monologue about why their relationship is terrible and fake, with them canonically broken up, and best case scenario, one of them totally evil. It should be noted that the final issue came out right before Valentine's Day, which by itself would already set people off, but more drama was beginning to brew in the fandom. Mainly that for Valentine's Day, DC put out a bunch of tweets celebrating canon DC couples, but then also included one with Harley emphasizing her being single, which could be seen as either twisting in the knife post-breakup, or straight up ignoring her relationship. This got even worse when a special Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn collectible statue was revealed and people saw the description for it, which... We all know Valentine's Day is usually about celebrating love, and these two characters know what it means to be there completely for someone else. They're the epitome of what it means to be a loyal best friend, above all else, and always a shoulder to cry on in times of need, whether it's Harley's horrible breakups with the Joker, or her wanting to prove herself as an independent woman. Ivy is always there for Harley to be her #1 support. Likewise, as she's demonstrated in their recent Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy miniseries, there's little Harley won't do for Ivy, including taking on the likes of Floronic Man, Mad Hatter, and Batwoman. That is why this statue is the perfect Valentine's Day reminder that to love someone can mean many different things, but above all else, it's to always be there for the people you care deeply about, in good times and bad. You know, gal pals. Yeah, like seriously, what the fuck is this? This, combined with the tweet, combined with rumors that DC editorial staff might be trying to minimize Harley and Ivy's relationship with things such as changing the figure's press release or banning writers from using them or modifying the kiss at the end of the Harley and Ivy miniseries to a kiss on the forehead, which, come on, forehead kisses can be sweet, but this is incredibly, incredibly tame, especially for a passionate goodbye kiss, led to Harley Ivy fans using the hashtag HarleyKissingIvy in order to showcase moments from the comic that had them as a couple, as well as display their own fan art and send the messages to DC that this is a popular, well-supported ship that shouldn't be erased or disregarded. For what it's worth, since this hashtag popped off, there have been more instances of Harley kissing Ivy square on the lips in mainline comics continuity, even if the stories themselves are still kinda all over the place about things. Ivy returned as a major player in Fear State, an event I would best describe as Arkham Knight for those who wished it had more OCs. Here, she gains wild, godly amounts of power and tries to kill all humans, before Harley Quinn reunites her with a good second version of her, which, holy shit, how is this happening again? And the end of the event shows Ivy calm down, the two cuddling peacefully in their sleep. Yay, everything is good. And then afterwards, in the new Harley Quinn solo comic, which is honestly a lot of fun overall, Ivy finally shows up and the two become a canon couple again, for a single issue, until Ivy struggles to not go back to her life of crime and lashes out against Harley, causing Harley to break things off and tell Ivy she should go on a road trip to find herself. Okay, what the fuck is with these fucking gay women and road trips? Fucking road trips keep coming up. From what I can tell, this segues into the new Poison Ivy solo series, which just started this month and whose first issue I honestly really liked. Granted, it feels like more of the same, with Ivy feeling bitter towards Harley for causing her to lose power and talking her down from her plans after Fear State, and Ivy figuring she needs to kill all of humanity as a rebound. You know how breakups are. But I guess what makes this work better is that, since we are getting it from Ivy's perspective rather than Harley's, we can see the complications of her mind, how she knows Harley didn't do anything wrong and that she messed up by breaking up with her, and how she now regrets it, but feels like it's too late to undo what was done. It gives me hope for what the rest of the series is going to be like. Hopefully the two are back together again. Hopefully. Harley and Ivy are portrayed rather weirdly in the comics, and it's hard to figure out exactly why. It's not as if DC hates them or is totally against them. No, both DC Pride anthologies had Harley Ivy stories in them as well as special variant releases. They still allow them to be a couple in works like Dark Knight of Steel and the Birds of Prey tie-in and other Elseworld stories, but yet at the same time, when it comes to mainline continuity, there seems to be reluctance to actually let them simply be together long term. Why this is? Who knows? I mean, there's certainly one easy answer to it, one clear, obvious reason one could jump to as to why they don't want these two women to be a couple, though there's also the fact to account for, which is that comic book couples are known to be turbulent and fluctuating, and comic book editors kind of just hate letting people be in a relationship. I mean, ask any Mary Jane Watson fan about it. They don't necessarily want Harley and Ivy to be together long term, because then they risk not being able to tell stories with Harley and Joker, or Batman and Ivy, or even just the two as solo characters and solo villains. Furthermore, I think part of it is that Harley and Ivy, being two popular characters, keep getting pulled into event comics, even when those event comics probably don't really need them, and that keeps interrupting the solo runs and the solo stories that are trying to be told. Regardless, I think it's clear that DC is fully aware of Harley Ivy's popularity and are more than happy to use them for Pride anthologies and marketing and covers and events, because they know people like me who like the ship will buy them and read them, even if they don't ever actually want to follow through beyond that, and may be taking active effort to minimize the ship overall. Which, I mean, welcome to Pride Month, I guess. Overall, on the PK2 crime scale, this one is pretty hard to determine. I guess I'm gonna go with mid-gay and mid-crime. There's so much fluctuation in these characters and what they do and what they're allowed to be that it's hard to make a determination one way or the other. God, that segment was kinda depressing. Can we, pick this up at all? Full disclosure, part of the reason why I wanted to make this vid was to gush about this show. So back in 2017, in order to get content for their then streaming service DC Universe, DC commissioned 26 episodes of a Harley Quinn animated series, divided into two 13-episode seasons. I think the announcement of this was initially met with a sort of like, this was about a year after the bad Suicide Squad movie, when Harley Quinn was super popular and starting to feel super overexposed, and was also on DC's streaming service, which was just destined to fail the moment they announced it. Like, you can barely get DC fans to pay for comics. What makes you think you can get them to pay for a dedicated streaming service? However, when the show first debuted in 2019, word of mouth quickly spread about how surprisingly good it was. Clips got shared around on sites like Twitter and YouTube as people started saying that the show was surprisingly actually really funny. And then I actually got around to watching the show and realizing it's the best animated Batman project since Batman Beyond, and yeah, I am counting the direct-to-DVD movies in that. The series' premise is quite simple and expected, really. After breaking up with the Joker, Harley moves in with Poison Ivy, her best friend, as she tries to make a name for herself in the criminal underworld. Along the way, we see her trying to get her own crew, trying to find her own rival, and trying her best to get into the Legion of Doom and get respect amongst other supervillains. The thing that initially makes the series unique is its tone, mainly that it's an incredibly vulgar and incredibly violent comedy. Almost to the point that it could be a turnoff, really. Like, I think the whole series is good, but the first few episodes could feel like a cheap Adult Swim knockoff Shock Value thing the first time you watch it. It takes a fair bit to see exactly how good the character writing is and how, despite being a comedy, it's placing a lot of thought into its themes and storytelling. The first season of Harley Quinn is overall pretty good, but it's really season 2 where things really pop off. So one of the things that's nice about projects like Harley Quinn is that, generally speaking, things that DC considers side projects or its own thing tend to get more leeway when it comes to what they can do with the characters and storylines. Meaning that Harley Quinn as a show gets to have a lot of plot progression and character development and character deaths and world changes, things DC doesn't really like happening in products they care about. That alone would be enough to make season 2 stand out on its own, as its first half follows up on season 1's ending and focuses on New Gotham and destroying the status quo of the villains and the world itself. But once you get to the halfway point of season 2, that's where Harley Quinn goes from really funny show to all-time great Batman series. Okay, so for context, the B-plot for most of Season 1 and a fair bit of Season 2 is Poison Ivy getting into a serious relationship with fellow supervillain Kite Man. Hell yeah. We see the two go from an uncomfortable, unwelcome flirting to loving dorky couple to eventually fiancés. All the while, Harley is trying to be supportive but finds herself confused and put off by the relationship, not fully getting what Ivy sees in Kite Man while still wanting to be a supportive best friend. Meanwhile, Ivy is dealing with her love of Kite Man, trying to figure out if she actually loves him, if she's willing to be in a long-term relationship with him, and if this is what she really wants with her life and future. This all leads us to the midpoint of Season 2, where Harley and Ivy escape Bane's rehabilitation center / whole prison, and, in a spontaneous moment of triumph, the two kiss each other. Now, I knew about the kiss beforehand. I had it spoiled for me before I watched the show, so I wasn't surprised when it happened. What I was surprised about was that it was the midpoint of Season 2, and not reserved for the finale, like some other shows would do. And while there is still a comic book style plot going on, with Darkseid and Justice League and whatnot, the last half of Season 2 is actually focused primarily on Harley and Ivy's feelings for each other, the complications that keep them from becoming a couple officially, and how it affects the way both of them act. It reminds me a lot of Our Flag Means Death, actually, in the sense that you spend a fair bit of the show thinking you're watching a genre parody, only to realize the longer it goes on that this was a gay romance story the whole time. Harley Quinn isn't an animated series in which Harley and Ivy get together, it's an animated series about Harley and Ivy getting together. And I think the fact that it spends so much time exploring it unashamedly makes it really stand out. Like, for starters, just the fact that the primary conflict here comes about not because of being a coming out story or because of homophobia or anything, but rather from the complications of falling in love with a friend makes it feel like a breath of fresh air amongst queer romance stories. I know you could say there's an issue with it using the cheating bisexual stereotype, since Kite Man and Ivy were still engaged when her and Harley kissed and realized they had feelings for each other, but I think the series handles it overall with tact and grace. Part of what makes it so appealing is that these aren't perfect characters, that they aren't making the right and sensible decision at all moments, and that it's aware that sometimes the choices you make can hurt others. It's a story about two flawed characters who have been hurt and know that they have the capacity to hurt those around them, trying to see if they're allowed to find solace in each other, and I don't know, I think that's really great. The show got a tie-in comic series called The Eat Bang Kill Tour, which continues off where Season 2 ended. Not only is this comic a lot of fun and very cute, but it also in some ways feels like a better version of the Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy miniseries. Much like that one, Eat Bang Kill Tour focuses on Harley and Ivy in a new relationship, going on a road trip as Harley tries to comfort Ivy after a sad and traumatic event, and Ivy trying to deal with her own mental health issues and her feelings regarding her and Harley. But where this one succeeds is that it actually allows the couple to have cute and heartwarming moments. It allows them joy, and even the moments of conflict and sadness feel rooted not in some weird evil plant resurrection stuff, but in Ivy's own guilt regarding what she's done to other people, making it more personal and understandable. It's both a victory lap and a scoop of ice cream for those who want gay fluff, while also having enough depth and introspection for those who want to see this explored more seriously and realistically. I think it might be obvious, but Harley Quinn, the animated series, and the Eat Man Kill Tur comics are my favorite versions of this ship, and quite honestly, possibly my favorite version of both characters. It gives me everything I want, being unashamedly gay, incredibly funny, using a lot of the Batman mythos, and sometimes even being really moving. On the Be Gay Do Crime scale, it gets max gay and max crime credits. It's the one with the most gay content and the highest body count. I mean, they even gave Joker character development. You know how rare it is for the Joker to get character development? They'd rather add more Jokers than give a single one of them character development. But yeah, I highly recommend it. It's all on HBO Max. Season 3 is apparently coming this summer. You have more than enough time to catch up. I titled the section Why This Ship Matters, and I'm realizing as I write this, the only way to really talk about that is to instead think of it as why this ship matters so much to me, just in the hopes that maybe through myself I can find some sense of universality. So for starters, I've always been a fan of both characters. As a teenager in the Joker fandom, I was acutely aware of Harley Quinn and always had an appreciation for her. As for Ivy, well, Batman and Robin was one of the first movies I remember watching as a wee toddler, and even though that movie is bad, seeing Poison Ivy was the first time I remember getting a very strange feeling, one that, well, let's just say it made me want red hair growing up. So I had been a fan of the characters for a while, and growing up I definitely knew about the ship teasing between them, the little jokes people would make about it, but I never thought I would actually ever see it become canonized. Like as a kid, the only work I could look to for proper representation was Deers. So yeah, on its own, to see characters I've always liked become a thing and to have a gay ship, that means a lot. But also now, as a bisexual adult, I think the thing that makes the ship so appealing beyond my love for the individual characters is simply how unique it feels. Like I said before, you don't have a lot of gay superhero couples, and certainly not with villains. But it goes deeper than novelty. Harley and Ivy's status as supervillains means you get a dynamic you don't really see often in queer art. Messiness. Harley and Ivy is the story of two people who struggle with their own identity, with their place in the world around them, who will lash out in anger and frustration, who aren't mentally healthy, who manage to find stability in each other. A common through line in basically all versions of this couple is that Harley and Ivy are incredibly good for each other. Ivy helps Harley with her sense of self-worth and independence. Harley helps Ivy remember her humanity and the existence of good in the world. It's sort of funny to listen to Paul Dini talk about the Harley and Ivy episode of BTAS and deciding to pair the two together so casually without much thought, because it really is the perfect match, isn't it? Whether he knew it or not at the time, he struck gold. Like, it really only makes sense for these two. Here you have two female characters who are both doctors, both previously viewed primarily through their relationship and interaction with male characters, both with very different personalities and power sets that complement each other well in a team-up, both fluctuating between good and evil depending on the situation, both relatively sympathetic. Yeah, it's the perfect combo. And the fact that these two are allowed to be in a relationship while still keeping so much of their personality, their struggles, their sense of fun, their flirtatious and promiscuous nature, it's like, you know, it's really nice to see two characters like this that are allowed to be sex positive. Like, they're allowed to be sexually active with each other, and it's portrayed not as fan service, but cute and passionate. It feels really rare. I think overall, that's what makes me, and I assume other people, like the ship so much. It's a pairing that showcases how no matter what flaws you have, no matter your history, you're worthy of love and affection and tenderness. That you're allowed someone who can be fun and exciting and also caring and intimate. It's an incredibly unique pairing, and I love it. And I'm so excited to see what other adventures these two end up in. Until then, happy Pride, everyone! One of the things I love about Pride Month is seeing appreciation for LGBTQ talent. There are a lot of brilliant queer creators who make fantastic work and deserve to have it recognized and spotlighted. Wonderful and talented people like Princess Weeks, Mia Mulder, NerdSync, Sarah Zed, PhilosophyTube, Jessie Gender, Laura Crone, Kat Black, Lola Sebastian, Lindsay Ellis, H-Bomber Guy, and so many others. You can find all of these creators and way more on Nebula, a streaming award-nominated service built by content creators for content creators. With Nebula, you can support creators directly while also enjoying exclusive and ad-free content. And thanks to a deal with CuriosityStream, if you go to curiositystream.com/LadyEmily, you can get an entire year of CuriosityStream and Nebula for just $14.79, a 26% discount. If you don't know, CuriosityStream is a streaming service focused on documentaries and nonfiction content. Every Pride Month, I try to find new Pride-related things to watch, and one of the things I watched this year was Tell Them Anything You Want. It's a documentary made by Spike Jonze about Maurice Sendak, author of Where the Wild Things Are, who also lived as a closeted gay man with his partner for 50 years. It's a frank and honest extended conversation with Maurice about his life, his history, his art, and his worldview, and it's something that's insightful and provides an interesting perspective from a very interesting man. I think it's important to engage with something in someone like this, as you can get a deeper understanding of our history and our struggles. You can watch Tell Them Anything You Want, as well as thousands of other excellent documentaries on CuriosityStream. And the best part is that so long as you have CuriosityStream, you'll also have access to Nebula. Once you use the code to sign up for CuriosityStream, you'll receive an email from Nebula granting you access. So go to curiositystream.com/LadyEmily to get a year of CuriosityStream and Nebula at a discount, and enjoy the hours upon hours of content there is to choose from. As always, I'd like to thank all my wonderful patrons, who are just the sweetest people. I'd especially like to thank Cinemageddon Reviews, Dana Carrier, Darren Ost, Jessica Lane, Mr. Joshua, Pieman III, and Simon Welsh. Thank you all once again, and happy Pride Month, y'all. I hope you don't mind this little fluff video. I just wanted to make something celebratory for once. I swear next time will be Wrath Month. Okay, but do you remember that time that Injustice 2 did a Pride event where you got a reward for beating the shit out of Poison Ivy over and over again, and they had to cancel it after Backlash? What was that? Oh my god!